Welcome back to another episode of the Consumer Guide to Property Damage. Thank you, first of all, for joining us. We are so fortunate today to have Doug Quinn with us. He is the Executive Director of the American Policyholders Association. And Doug, because a lot of people probably have no idea what the American Policyholders Association is, could you please just start by sharing with us a little about the APA?
Sure. The APA is a 501c4 nonprofit organization. And basically what we do is we defend consumers against being defrauded by their insurance company or the vendors, such as adjusters, engineers, or third-party administrators hired by their insurance company. And we also file complaints against licensed professionals who violate the ethics of their licensing board.
Got it. Wow. Extremely important. So you mentioned the word defrauded by your insurance carrier. Can you tell us a little about what insurer fraud might look like? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, what a lot of people don't understand is that at the time of claim, your insurance company's interest and your interest are adverse. So a lot of people sort of think the insurance company is on my side, but in reality, the insurance company's interest, your interests are exactly adverse to each other. If they pay you $1, they lose $1. So, and that's not a big deal. Those kind of business contracts happen all the time. But what becomes a problem is the way that the system is set up, where the consumer is outmatched both in capacity and experience. The average person really doesn't understand insurance in any way, shape, or form. They don't understand, the law. They don't understand what their policies. Nobody even reads their policies in most cases. And a lot of people at the time of a claim, having suffered a loss, are not functioning at full capacity because they've been through a traumatic experience. And at that time, many people will only file one or two claims in their lifetime, and you're going against sort of the insurance industry A-team. Insurance companies have, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars. They've got armies of attorneys, accountants, lobbyists, engineers, claims adjusters, all of whom are lifetime professionals and share all their experience with each other, and they've got a lot of data, artificial intelligence. And so the average consumer going against an insurance company and filing a claim, I always joke, it's like your first day of Little League and you're 8 years old and the coach says, "Hey, kids, we're going to have our first game this weekend. We're going to go up and play the Yankees." Mm-hmm. Your odds of prevailing successfully are somewhat limited in that. And again, that's the way the system is set up. That's fine. However, insurance companies oftentimes will hire third-party administrators. They'll hire engineers. They'll hire adjusters. Even lower level insurance company employees, and all those people will sort of have bias toward the insurance company. There's a clear thing of bias toward the check writer. You want to make sure you get the next job. You want to make sure you have financial stability for yourself if you have that job. So sometimes that will color the decisions that they're making in processing your claim. Sometimes that will force them to understate a claim, and then they'll pull out all stops and all the guns on board to be able to defend that lowball offer. So again, that happens, but in many cases, we'll see fraud occur. It is a system that is ripe for fraud, and the reason why.
Can we define fraud? I think that there's some misconception about what is true fraud. Just stating that they're not, or they're not covering or underplaying the claim, as we've heard, or other things, that's not always fraud.
No, and I get a lot of complaints like, well, Allstate underpaid me by $10 on my auto insurance claim and they're fraudulent. No, that's not fraud. There are basically three levels of insurance dispute. One is just a simple misunderstanding. You think your property's worth this, I think it's that, and we come to an agreement. There are other situations that's called bad faith, where they're actually violating the good faith requirements under the contract. They're cheating you, but it doesn't necessarily bleed into criminal behavior. It is a civil tort. And then the third level is actual criminal fraud. every state defines fraud in its penal code differently, but I've looked at them all and they all sort of fit a broad definition, which is an intentional, it's three components, an intentional misrepresentation for a profit or to avoid a loss. So it has to be intentional, not, oops, I made a mistake. Mistakes happen, that's fine. And it has to be a misrepresentation, and it has to be for a profit or to avoid a loss. That's the general definition of fraud.
So either not to lose money, or to gain money. There has to be money involved in criminal fraud, is what I'm
Some
hearing.
form of a profit or avoidance of a loss.
Okay.
Avoidance of a loss.
Which usually is expressed financially in the form of money.
Got it.
And so something as simple as, maybe the person that's handling your claim, let's say someone files a claim, the person handling your claim, they're not maybe a contractor, right? So they don't necessarily know that a certain component might need to be, part of a restoration project. That's not necessarily fraud.
No.
That is that it kind of falls into what it sounds like level 2 there was more of a I didn't know what I didn't know kind of thing. When does that go too far?
Listen, mistakes happen. I would make the case that the insurance company should not put anybody in a position to evaluate your property or your claim unless they are an expert in that field, right? They've got plenty of money. They have the opportunity to hire the best of the best. So there should not be a lack of experience. There shouldn't be a lack of due diligence, but we do understand that mistakes happen. When it goes too far is when it becomes intent. When you have, say, an engineer hired by an insurance company or a third-party administrator hired by an insurance company, and they're faking the facts. And here's,
Altering pictures or not intentionally not including certain things or something like that.
right. You'll see, some cases we'll see an engineer and adjuster stand on a roof on top of damage and shoot pictures all the way around where there's no damage. Or there'll be damage referenced, in the pictures that they'll shoot, but then when the report comes out, none of those pictures are included. And the easiest way to say with fraud is it's faking the facts.
Faking the facts.
Right,
That's a great term for everyone to remember.
Right.
Faking the facts.
Right.
Well, how would a consumer know that they are a victim of fraud? Like, what are some things that they can kind of look out for or be aware of?
The first thing we want people to know is, you're responsible to make sure that your interests are represented. So we love to see people hire professional public adjusters, attorneys. We love to see people rely on their contractors, although in many states, contractors are limited in their ability to advocate for you in a claim, but they are certainly one of your best resources in repairing your property.
Especially from a knowledge standpoint.
100%. That is the expert on repairing your property, what it's going to cost to repair your property. But again, in many cases, their hands are tied. They can't advocate for you, but they can certainly speak to you about your situation. So you should always be relying on your professionals, your attorney, your public adjuster, your contractor. And the other thing we say is, fraud is it's a white-collar crime. These aren't thugs throwing bricks through jewelry store windows during a smash and grab. These are smart people doing devious things, and they have a lot of experience, and they know how to cover their tracks. So in many cases, you won't see the fire, you won't see the smoke. You'll just get a little whiff of smoke. Your gut. We tell people your gut is your best, and same thing with your professionals. Your gut feeling will tell you something is wrong here, right? I know that this is a legitimate loss. My professionals are telling me, what the scope of this loss is and what the causation of this loss is, and yet I'm hearing something different from the other side, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't jive with what the people who are aligned with my interests, my contractor, my public adjuster, my attorney, what those people are aligned with my interests, what they're telling me, my experts.
Now, based on what you were saying earlier, that there's 3 different levels, could that not just be level 2? If they're not intentionally altering or faking facts and digging their heels in the sand and saying, no, we're not paying or whatever, that is still not exactly the same, right?
Exactly. It has to remember, intent is very important, and intent is sometimes hard to prove, right? Because anybody can sort of say, oops, I made a mistake. But if I look at your last 100 reports, and you've made the same mistake 98 out of 100 times, and every single one of those benefit you or benefit the carrier, now we're talking,
Intent.
it's not ups anymore. Yeah, now we're talking patterns and practices, and we start to look at that and examine that. And that's one of the things the APA does is we collect all this data. It's a lot of people working together and sharing this information, because you may have an engineer or an adjuster in a specific marketplace who's been doing the same thing for 20 years, but because everybody's in a silo, a consumer might be, filing your first or second ever claim.
wouldn't know that.
You're not talking to anybody else. You don't know Bob, who is the insurance company adjuster in the Dallas-Fort Worth market, is doing this same thing to people. But when we start to get together and talk and share information, now we start to isolate, there's patterns and practices. We see the same person doing the same thing. If I flip a coin 100 times and it lands on heads 100 times, something's wrong.
It probably has two heads on that coin.
I've had stories of various contractors as I'm, out nationwide talking to a lot of different people. And I had a gentleman tell me once that there's a contractor or there's an adjuster in his town that tells homeowners if they use that contractor, he will deny the claim.
Uh-huh.
And that is not fraud. That would be considered bad faith, unless he is in their faith, faking things in order to deny the claim. I'm trying to get clarification around when a consumer should talk to you about something, because he's saying those things to consumers, right? And I'm sure that that's not the only time that happens. What things could they listen for from their insurance company that might trigger reaching out to the American Policyholders Association or the APA?
So that is something where he's saying, hey, if you use this contractor, I'm going to deny your claim without even examining the claim. That's one of those things where it's not the fire, it's not the smoke, but it's the smell that something's wrong. It doesn't pass the sniff test. And how is he going to deny that claim? If a denial is a foregone conclusion, then there's got to be a mechanism of denial. There's got to be, he's got to go in there and somehow, if it's a legitimate claim and they're going to deny it, then that means they have to fake the facts somehow.
Got it. Okay.
So therefore, fraud could very well be present. And a lot of this stuff is not like, okay, I saw this, it's fraud. It means I have to look deeper into this. I need a professional who's going to examine it. And one of the things, anyone who's hiring a public adjuster or an attorney, number one, ask, are they an APA member? Are they a member of the organization that protects you from fraud? Number two, are they sharing information? Because a lot of people, listen, a civil attorney, their job is to get you paid, right, and move on to the next case. Their job is not necessarily to have the person who committed fraud against you prosecuted.
Correct.
But we say that's a very important piece of the scene of the situation, because even though you got paid, you're going to leave that person out there. Did they just become a jerk on Tuesday of that week?
Probably
no, this
not.
this is somebody who's probably been doing this for a long time, and they're going to do a lot of damage. The same reason why we don't let rapists go in our community, because they're going to offend and ruin someone else's life.
Absolutely.
So it's very important that you talk to your professionals, your attorney, your public adjuster. Are you an APA member? Are you working to make sure that if we find fraud in this case, that it will be prosecuted or at least submitted for investigation?
And how would they go about, reaching out to the APA as a consumer? And is that a direct line of contact? Do they have the ability to be a part of the APA or reach out to the APA?
Yes, the APA for consumers can join as what's called an associate member for free. We do that on purpose. The APA, we do not accept money from the government. We do not accept money from insurance companies. We are 100% funded by people in the restoration industry who basically say, look, I make a good living what I'm doing, but I watch people every day get taken advantage of. I'm going to be part of this organization that protects my customers or protects my consumers. And I know you're both APA members. We have a lot of our people that are members of the APA, and you're not going to make any money from being an APA member, and
Right.
but the reality is you're doing the right thing because you want to protect the people who are putting food on your table, your customers.
And
Absolutely.
what resources does the APA offer for consumers as part of their membership, that they have access to, various attorneys that they could talk to? I mean, I don't really know from a consumer standpoint what benefits there are for them. Can you share a little bit about that?
One of the questions you are is, it's sort of a paradox is, we'll be like, you want to do business with someone who's an APA member. Because number one, they've got to sign an ethics and fiduciary pledge to make sure that they conduct themselves in an ethical manner. Otherwise, they can be removed from the organization. Number two, here's somebody who's going out of their way, giving their time and money to defend you. So you probably have somebody who's not just focused about how do I make the most money off you. They're helping you as well. So we recommend that people do business with someone who's an APA member. When you interview a contractor, an attorney, a public adjuster, say, are you a member of the APA?
Absolutely.
Now, the paradox is this. When someone comes to me and says, can you give me a list of people who are APA members? No, we don't do referrals. And the reason why is we've seen other organizations that have just been a referral club. It's just a way for people to get business. We're not about that.
Okay.
I literally, when I have a professional in the restoration industry ask me, hey, if I join the APA, what's in it for me? I can proudly say absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
You are here to help others. You are here to help the people that are putting food on your table, and it makes it very easy for us because we know we're surrounded by people that have the right values. What we do offer for people who are members is, you have a membership portal. We have a lot of resources in terms of we connect you directly to the engineering boards for all 50 states. We have an automatic process where you can file a complaint right on our website, where before that they were scattered. It's almost like they built this system that, they didn't want you to file complaints. We have it all compiled, all 50 state engineering boards right on there, all 50 state Department of Insurance right on our website. You can file a complaint directly through there. We also have built the first ever SIU, Special Investigation Unit, who is the APA CPU Consumer Protection Unit, the first ever in the history of the country that solely defends consumers against insurer fraud. And if you have a case where you feel you may have been defrauded, or your professional comes to you and says, I think you should have the APA look at this, you send that in and we'll investigate it, and it's free of charge. And we have one of the top insurance fraud investigators in the country, prosecutors in the country, who runs that. And he has a team of long-term law enforcement, 20, 30-year veteran law enforcement fraud investigators that work for him, and they'll investigate it, and it's free of charge. And that's,
that's a huge benefit.
It's a very expensive unit. It's a lot of resources to hire the right people, because we were very careful in making sure we got top professionals, top tier people. But again, the people that fund it want to make sure that you're protected. So, and then we have a lot of literature right on our website and our resources, how to defend yourself against insurer fraud, how to successfully self-advocate in an insurance dispute, how to spot insurer fraud. So there's a lot of that on our website that we provide.
Amazing
that is
resource.
wonderful.
It's an amazing resource. So I do have a question, because you mentioned the ability to file a complaint right through, or you have the information on the engineering boards, and you have the information on all 50 states of the departments of insurance. And let's say someone does suspect that there is something just not right, it doesn't pass the smell test, whatever, and they decide to file a complaint with the Department of Insurance for their state. What does that look like? Who answers that? What would a customer would a consumer basically then reach out to the APA and say, I filed this complaint, but nobody ever answered my complaint? I mean, most people don't even know they can file a complaint with the Department of Insurance. So
that is correct, and we recommend people file complaints with the Department of Insurance. But if you feel like it could be criminal fraud, come directly to the APA and let us vet it first. And our investigation team may come back and say, "Hey, we've investigated it. We don't find fraud, but you may want to refer this to your Department of Insurance. Here's the information. Here's the address. Here how to do it." In some cases, we'll even file a complaint for you.
Because there are things that, honest criminal fraud should not go to the Department of Insurance. In my understanding, it should go to the Attorney General's office.
In some cases, the Department of Insurance is actually the agency that you report to, and they investigate, and then if they find criminal fraud, it goes to the AG, and in some cases it goes directly to the Attorney General. And the reason why we work with the Attorney General is in most states, the Attorney General is the top law enforcement official in every state. Excuse me. So they are in a position, White collar crime is very difficult to, it's very expensive. It's very difficult to investigate. And a lot of times your local district attorney, your local prosecutors in your county or your parish, they're overwhelmed with, real crime that's violent crime, right?
Sure.
Burglary, murder, those kind of things. So they may not have the resources to be able to prosecute
But your
white
team
collar
does.
crime. But the Attorney General
The Attorney
certainly
General
does.
does,
The
right.
Attorney General, and if you look at the Attorneys General in the United States, they're the ones that got the tobacco settlement. I mean, taking on big tobacco was a huge thing. They're the ones that got the opioid crisis under control with some of the manufacturers of opioids. They're the ones that went, currently they're in a big initiative going after big tech for some abusive practices and anti-competitive practices. So they've got a lot of power. And they've got a lot of expertise, and they can handle white-collar crime, and they also have the willingness to go after large and powerful opponents.
And it's also an elected office.
in
right?
most states.
In most states, not in all?
Some states it is.
It's appointed. I
yeah.
did not know that.
But I think the great thing that I hear you saying is we can't all just go file a complaint with the Attorney General, right? Otherwise there would be a million complaints with the Attorney General, and that would really deplete the resources of being able to investigate those and do actual a full investigation. But it sounds like if a consumer is uncertain whether or not this is something that should really, reach that type of a level, that's the best place to start with the American Policyholders Association, because you have the ability to look at their claim, their factual, submission of, hey, I think something's not right here. You have a team of people that has the ability to look at that and give them advice as to whether this is yes, what you think it is, or no, it's not what you think it is, and here's what your next step is.
So one of the reasons why it's better to go through the APA instead of going directly through the Attorney General office is, we have professionals who will vet the case. And there are 50 Attorneys General in the United States. There's one for each state. And we have met with at least 40 of them so far and explained who we are and what we do, what our mission is. And one of the commitments we make is we will not bring them a case that is not a valid case that's already been vetted. Doesn't mean that the person's guilty. It just means it's worthy of their time and their energy.
And I'm sure they appreciate that.
They do, because nobody wants you to waste their time. They're like every other person and agency. They have limited budget, limited resources, limited manpower. So we want to make sure that we're going to be respectful of their resources. So we make a commitment that we will not bring them a case that we do not believe is a good case. And cops like to talk to cops. Prosecutors like to talk to prosecutors because they know.
It's a language, right?
You understand,
Yeah.
you speak the same language, you understand what the situation is. So if you're a consumer, you can send in a complaint, but if it goes through the APA, it's very different. And to be fair, most cases we turn down and say this is not fraud. Now, it may be a misunderstanding, or it may be a civil tort, bad faith, and you absolutely should be pursuing it, but it may not be criminal fraud. And we're very careful with that because, again, we're not trying to waste resources, and we understand that our reputation goes out with every case.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
So that's something that being a member of the APA sort of puts you in, gives that level of expertise, because most other people do not have that kind of a resource. And on top of that, it gives you a very loud voice. We have a political expertise that the average person does not have. We have a lot of ability to speak to the press. We've been quoted in the New York Times, in Fortune magazine, U.S. News and World Report, NBC News. We've testified to multiple state legislatures. We've testified on Capitol Hill to the U.S. Senate. We've done press conferences with congressmen and senators. The average person doesn't have that kind of an access. By working together with an organization like the APA, we have a collective voice that is much louder than us individually.
And how would somebody go about becoming a member of the APA, or how would they find that information? What do they do? Right
on our website, which is apassociation.org, alphapapaassociation.org, all one word. Go right to membership, and it will take you to the different types of membership if you're a professional, if you're a company or a firm, or if you're a consumer, and it'll walk you right through it. And again, for consumers to join, it's free of charge. It brings a lot of resources to the table. And again, those consumers can thank people like you for that, for making that happen for them, because you're the ones that fund it. And that's why I always say you should always ask your restoration professional, your contractor, your attorney, your public adjuster, are you an APA member? Are you helping defend me against this and defend the community against this?
And we will have a link directly to that website accessible for you to be able to click on, so that if you choose to become a member, you can. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Doug. We really appreciate it. I know that it was quite a haul to get out here, and gotta love travel right now and canceled flights. And it just means a lot to us. And I know it means a lot to our viewers that you made the
That you were
time.
here.
Always
Thank
worth
you
it to
so much.
spend time with you two ladies, and always worth it to help consumers.
Absolutely.
you.
That's what we're all here for.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you.